Welcome to Forum. I'm Mina Kim. She's not my type. That's what President Trump infamously told a reporter after writer Eugene Carol came forward with her story that Trump had sexually assaulted her in a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room in 1996. Still, two Manhattan juries found Trump liable for sexually abusing and defaming Carol in 2023 and for defaming her again after the verdict in 2024, ultimately awarding her a combined nearly $90 million in damages. Trump is appealing those verdicts. Carol is now opening up with her characteristic humor and sharp eye about what went on behind the scenes in those legal fights. Her new memoir is Not My Type: One Woman versus a President. Eugene, welcome to Forum.
Thank you. And that's a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much, Nina.
Oh, thank you for being here. You open the book, and it's very clear from the outset that this is going to be a very different kind of book, with a description of Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, deposing you by asking you to tell her how many people you've slept with. Why do you think she was asking you that?
Well, Alina Habba Esquire, Trump's most beautiful attorney, wearing a diamond ring as big as a Ritz cracker, emerald Chanel jacket, high heels that made me dizzy just looking at them, and I was sitting down. My attorney, Robbie Kaplan, the world's greatest civil rights attorney, had told me over and over, do not trust Alina Habba Esquire. Do not trust her. When she walked in the deposition room, 63rd floor of the Empire State Building, Robbie's office, and opened up with a smile like sunshine and said, "Good morning, Miss Carroll." I fell for her like a ton of bricks. And then the deposition started. And about midway through, she said, "Miss Carroll, I hate to ask you this, but could you tell us approximately everyone you've slept with?" Now, Nina, you and I know she didn't do this for the information. She did this to humiliate me and to shame me and to make me go inside myself and feel like an old dishcloth. But no way. It was like, I love talking about my lovers. I loved every single one of them. I could not wait to list them. It was, actually, it was the only really tolerable 5 minutes in the whole deposition. But that was a signal about what Trump's case against me was going to be. They were going to make me look like a floozy, a lying, gold-digging floozy, and this was just the first shot across the bow.
Shaming, blaming, belittling. Yes, they were central to Trump's defense, including also his initial response to your allegations by saying, "She's not my type," suggesting that you're not attractive enough for him to want to be with. Though, didn't he confuse a picture of you with his ex-wife, Marla Maples, under deposition?
The great Robbie Kaplan, she had warned him. Nina, she had warned President Trump 3 times that she was going to show him a picture of Eugene Carol. 3 times she warned him. Then she presents a picture of 2 couples at a Saturday Night Live party. He looks at it. She said, "Please identify the people in this picture." He identifies my ex-husband immediately. He has no idea who Ivana is. And he looks at me. He said, "Oh, that's Marla. That's my wife." And that moment was wonderful because Robbie had established 5 minutes before that he was sitting at the Resolute desk when he told the reporters from the Hill, that I was not his type. And then Robbie asked later, "Your 3 wives, are they your type?" And he had to say yes. So that it was a brilliant moment, and many attorneys would have told him, "You have no case. you have no case. But he went forward.
Well, yes, and that did play out. At the same time, though, I was really struck by how your book revealed sort of the potency still of these tropes around
Oh,
assault, right? I mean, can you
ah,
talk about the mock trials your lawyers put on
oh,
and what they taught you, these test trials, about what you would need to do to convince a jury that you had been assaulted?
you brought up a big subject because we pulled a trick, and it's a trick women have known for centuries. And here's what happened. We had and before big trials, like before the OJ trial, before really big trials, um, lawyers hold what they call jury exercises. And normal people like you and I would call them mock trials. So for an entire day, they presented a case to typical New Yorkers. They presented our entire case. All 29 typical New Yorkers absolutely knew it was a fact that two people could end up in a dressing room in Bergdorf Goodman's in 1996. They all absolutely agreed that two people could engage in something sexual in a Bergdorf dressing room in 1996. And they totally, all 29 of them, 27 of them, agreed that yes, I was one of those people and President Trump was one of those people. They had no trouble. But they thought I was begging Trump for it because I was too old, a desiccated crone sitting in that courtroom. They could not believe that I was attractive enough to assault. So here's what we did. We found the hairdresser who did my hair in 1996 for my talk show. We found the exact woman who did my makeup in 1996, who happened to be the hairdresser from 1996. And we cut my hair like it was in 96. We did the exact makeup we did in 96. And most deliciously and wonderfully, I wore the same clothes, the same outfits, the jacket on the book cover, that beautiful brown jacket on the book cover, that's from Bergdorf's from 1993. So I wore clothes that I wore in 1996. And what happened when we got to the real trials is I looked enough like that woman in 1996 to where the jury could believe I could have been that woman in the dressing room in 1996. So the trick worked, and every woman knows how right I was to try it.
Did it ever bother you or depress you that that's what you had to do to try to
No,
convince a jury?
no, no. I'm 81 years old. I know we found out from the mock trials, Nina, that as Robbie Kaplan said, as soon as they were over, we were stupid. We didn't even see. We thought this trial was for all women. That's what we thought. We thought it was for all women. No, no, we didn't even see the gender divide in this country. We did not see it. We did not see it. We did not. We just thought this is for all women. This is glorious. This is going to be a great case. No, it was not about all women. It was about one woman and one man in that dressing room. So we changed our argument. That's and we won because of that. Uh, as soon as we realized what was going on, and we chose a different attorney to present our case. Robbie was going to present our case, and she's a little 5'3" powerhouse of a woman. But no, we chose a powerful man, Mike Ferrara, to present my case because we knew the men, and we got an upstate jury. An upstate jury in New York means Trump counties. Our jury was not a Manhattan jury. We're
Mm.
Southern District of New York. We had upstate red counties with people who probably, and I don't know how they voted, but they came. Many of them were not caught eating New York, liberal jury, New York Times reading. No, these were they got their news from Facebook feed. They got their news from Instagram. So totally different jury. And we, of course, convinced them. We're just with the
Yeah.
evidence.
I just have to read that quote that you're referring to from your lawyer, Ravi Kaplan, who said, "We were idiots. We live in a liberal bubble. We live in a world which believes in equality for women, for all women. So we put on a powerful case for all women. But trying a case for all women caused us to lose jury members. Eugene, I never want to hear you say this case is for all women again. This case is for you. The juries don't care about Me Too. They don't care. They care about one woman and one man in a dressing room. We were so blinded by our vision, we couldn't even see the gender divide in this country. It's much more pronounced than any of us thought. So since we can't fix the gender divide before trial, we'll use it. We'll lean into it." It was not that easy to lean into it. You said you found the hairstylist who did your hair in the 1990s. And that was quite a story. We're coming up on a break, but wow, that took like months, right?
Yeah, well, I found her though, and her hair salon was in the wine cellar of the restaurant her husband owned.
Wow. We're getting more of what you probably didn't know happened behind the scenes of Eugene Carroll's lawsuits against President Trump for sexual assault and defamation. Stay with us for more after the break. I'm Mina Kim. You're listening to Forum. I'm Mina Kim. Eugene Carroll successfully sued the president not once, but twice, and 2 Manhattan juries found him liable for sexually abusing and defaming Carroll in 2023 and for defaming her again after the verdict in 2024. She's giving us a behind-the-scenes look at those legal battles today, this hour on Forum, but also in her new memoir, Not My Type, One Woman versus a President. To join the conversation, 866-733-6786 is the number to call. The email address, forum@kqed.org. And you can find us on our social channels at KQED Forum. So you won those 2 judgments, Eugene, against Donald Trump, while he has escaped legal liability in so many other contexts. And I just got to ask you how that felt.
The winning,
Yeah.
it was, well, it was the happiest moment of my life. It was the happiest moment of the relief and the happiness. Sometimes happiness is so great that it becomes almost painful for, a short amount of time because it's so much happiness. It's so much happiness. And now the happiness is even it's building in a warmer, stronger way because I have big plans for that 83.3 million. I want to give it to everything that Donald Trump hates. And so we're making plans right now. And Mina, if you have any ideas, if your callers have any ideas of what we can do with this money, we can do a lot of good with it. Women have been pushed back by 50 years. I would like to bring back women's rights across the country, maybe use the money for a little bit of that. If anybody else has some ideas of what to do with that 83 million, I don't need, I don't, I really don't care about money. I'm very happy. I live in a hovel in the country. I'm fine. I have everything I need, but I think the country is suffering, being torn apart at the seams, and maybe I can do a little bit of good with Donald Trump's money. And he's going to hate it. He's going to hate that we're using his money to bind up the wounds of democracy.
Well, I will add that to the call out, Eugene. Listeners, if you have ideas too for Eugene on how she should use the money that she is owed in damages, share that as well. Do you think you will see the money? He has been appealing the verdict.
Oh, yeah. We just absolutely, the United States Court of Appeals Second Circuit actually absolutely said yesterday on July 10th, it's over, it's done. You've done appealing to him. Now he has 90 days to appeal to the Supreme Court, which he will probably do. And Mina, I'm sorry I keep calling you Nina.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm a moron. Mina,
at all.
Mina, what do you think? What do you think the chances are the Supreme Court is going to take a case about a president assaulting a woman in 1996? What do you think the odds are, Mina?
Yeah. Extremely. I would say extremely unlikely, but I've also learned many things that I think do not always come to
Yeah,
pass, Eugene.
exactly, exactly, exactly. So, and then yes, we will win because he has lost every single appeal. He's losing. He will lose the appeals in the second case, the $83 million one, because he has no case. He hasn't. He so defamed me that during the second trial for defamation, during the trial, he one time posted over 40 obnoxious smearing posts in an hour while he was sitting in the courtroom. And after the trial, every day during that trial, he would go out and address the press. I'm the one who should get the damages, he said. I'm the one who should get the money. I'm the one who's been damaged. So, yes, it was it was so apparent to the jury that he was damaging me that they awarded that large amount, which we're going to give away. If your viewers would call in with some of their ideas, we might be able to use them.
Um, I, you say that the result made you so happy it was almost painful,
Yeah.
but there was a cost, right, Eugene? I was struck by learning that ever since the assault, that you had not been able to be romantic with someone again.
No. Oh, yeah. There was a price and there was a cost. There was a price for what he did, and then there was a cost for coming forward. No doubt. And this is why women don't come forward because they're too smart. They don't want to lose their jobs. They have children and family to take care of. You know, they have their reputations. Your reputation is immediately smeared if you come out against a powerful person. Immediately, you're smeared. So it is there's a price, but I'm glad I paid it. I'm glad I did it.
Even now, I know that you also received thousands of death threats throughout the course of this process, continue to do that. How does that make you feel? Is that something that you have to think about and be conscious of on a regular basis?
Try not to think about it. I grab the joy whenever it's around. I'm having a good time right now. I love seeing you, and I love being set up in this nice little studio, and I love talking to you. So this is a joyful moment for me because you know what we're talking about? We're talking about how I beat Donald Trump twice. That's what we're talking about. So that makes me very happy.
The role of humor, too, must have played a big one through this whole process. It's such a difficult thing, right? Such a traumatizing thing, but your ability to access humor in it is pretty remarkable, Eugene.
Well, Mina, for centuries, women have laughed at the tragedies. It's a way of rising above it. Also, I was caught in the middle of a high comedy and surrounded with characters out of Jonathan Swift. Almost every moment to me was funny because in courtrooms, they don't talk like normal people. I mean, they're always so dramatic. You know, the defense is dramatic, and the plaintiff is dramatic, and they use language which is hard. It's all funny. It's all and the goings on behind the scenes. I couldn't help myself. I smiled almost the entire time I was writing the book. Also, it was a relief to get it down. I felt so much. I still feel great about writing the book. I just feel great about it. Yeah, I loved it, and I couldn't help myself. I'm an old journalist. What am I gonna do, Mina? I mean, what would you have done? You would have made a show about it, right?
Oh, you can't help when you see a good story, huh? That
You
journalist
can't
side of you.
help. You can't help it. You can't help
Um,
it.
well, we've got comments coming in, Eugene, and Jennifer writes, I just had to pull off the freeway in the
Oh,
excitement of hearing Eugene's inimitable voice. Thank you
oh.
for describing this experience with such candor and humor. Could you say a bit more about how you found ways to successfully counter questions about your own conduct during the assault and to get people to care about factual accuracy? I don't know if you want
Oh,
to go there, but you were questioned
oh,
about why you didn't scream, Eugene, during the
wow.
assault.
Thank you for the comment. Listen, it's a brilliant question. And every woman in the country listening right now understands that the Trump attorneys, uh, which this is the oldest argument in the world. There's a perfect victim. The perfect victim always screams. The perfect victim always burns her clothes after it happens. The perfect victim always, oh boy, reports to the police. Doesn't matter if she's going to get fired. Doesn't matter if she's going to be, beaten up if she comes forward. No, the perfect victim never smiles ever again after it's over. The perfect victim goes back to her house and covers herself in a dishcloth, and her life is basically over. They constantly attack me to the jury for saying I felt fabulous. That was one of their main arguments. I was not allowed to have those few minutes of joy. I was not allowed to go to a party. Even though it happened in 1996, I was supposed to be hanging my head along with every other victim and women in the United States who's ever been assaulted. We are not to smile. I should be sitting on your wonderful show right now like this. That's what I should be doing. Well, I'm not gonna sit there like that. I feel great. It happened, and now we beat him. And it's wonderful because there is not a perfect victim. Every woman is different. Every woman is different. I
Yes.
reacted with laughter because we understand why I did that, because that sort of kills an erotic moment, right? If you laugh. So, didn't work, but
Yeah. We're talking with Eugene Carol, and so are you. Let me go to caller Andrea in Castro Valley. Hi, Andrea, you're on.
Hi, Eugene Carol. I used to be a teacher, and I think one way to spend your money would be to come up with a nationwide contest for, junior high and high school kids to reflect on all the issues surrounding your win and how it affects women's rights and for women going forward. And it could be either visual art or written, but it would reach deeply into communities where people are both conservative and liberal, and
oh,
would have their kids reflect.
it's
Andrea, thanks.
boy, what a great idea. What? And it engages the young people in this country who are disassociating themselves from whatever's going on in the news, understandably. That is that is such a canny idea. I love that idea, and it's so doable. It's so doable. Andrea, are you still on? Maybe I can get her information after the show. That's a
Yeah,
good
well,
idea.
you're getting lots of suggestions. Thanks for that one, Andrea. Let me go to Billy in San Rafael next. Hi, Billy, you're on.
Hello. Well, first I want to say thank you to Eugene so much for being brave, and the happiness that I have now is kind of counteracting a lot of other things. Also, I want to tell you, I so miss your column. I used to read it every
Oh,
month. I think it was in Elle magazine,
yeah,
or
yeah,
is that correct?
yes,
Oh,
yes, it
I
is.
I loved it, and for years I missed it when
Oh,
you stopped. And then I said, "Oh, look at her! Now she's in the news again." Uh-oh! And then from then on, it's just been admiration and love for you. So thank you,
oh,
thank you.
thank you. So that's great to hear. That's great. By the way, the column is resurrected. The columns on Substack now.
Right.
Eugene Carol on Substack. So come and
Well,
join us.
listener Tom writes, Dear Miss Carol, thank you for all your courage and congratulations. May I suggest buying billboards in red MAGA areas listing all the crimes Trump is guilty of, exposing the criminal that he is and the damage that he is doing? Donald Trump,
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. You got smart listeners. I like it.
I
I like
do actually. Our
it. You really
listeners
have
are
really
pretty
smart.
amazing.
Yeah, gotta
He
say.
it, this whole process, what did you come to realize about the power of Donald Trump through this? It sounds like he ended up becoming greatly diminished in your eyes in the sense of the power that he held.
Well, Mina, now that's the most difficult question
Mm.
because I discovered that he is just an old guy wearing a lot of vividly apricot makeup with his hair like Barbara Stanwyck in Ball of Fire. That's who he is. However, on the other hand, he is one of the smartest people of the 21st century because he has taken this government by his throat and within 100 days has sucked it dry, and now he is in charge of everything. Plus, he has affected the rest of the world as following in our footsteps. So, on the one hand, a genius who other people are using to get to their own ends, like all the billionaires around him. And on this side, just an old guy, an old fat guy, actually. I don't want to body shame, but an old, fat, shrunken guy in a big blue suit with a red tie jumping out in front of him. So there's the dichotomy, and that's why we are right now seeming a little bit stunned on how to react to him. And I would like to sort of stir up stuff and just say, look, I'm an old lady and I could beat Donald Trump. Anybody could beat Donald Trump. We're here as an example. You just stand up and stick to your guns.
Well, this listener writes, I am such a fan. Back from Eugene's days as an advice columnist for Elle, I used to buy every gorgeous glossy magazine and turn straight to Ask Eugene. She's always had glamorous, glorious wisdom. Leanne writes, so excited to hear Eugene on your show. Please tell us where we can send fan mail. I guess that's your Substack, right?
Yeah.
Eugene. And Jennifer writes, you are such a firecracker. How about using Trump's money to help replace what Planned Parenthood has lost?
Oh,
Women
my
in
God,
red
that's
states.
a great idea. She's getting
Especially
a standing ovation. Standing ovation.
That's for you, Jennifer. Also, early childhood literacy program since Head Start has been gutted. More ideas coming in. Kristen writes, first of all, congratulations, Eugene, and kudos to your bravery. I love the title of your book and cannot wait to read. I am most concerned about human rights and the environment and would suggest supporting the ACLU and California Native Plant Society.
The California native plants, the wildflowers on the mountainsides they're every one it's just, I'm always stunned when I go to California, even if on the busiest highway in the world, you see these beautiful, delicate wildflowers. I agree with that. I love the flowers in California. Love them.
So, and I should also mention, we are getting, and we really appreciate this, listeners, from you, Cheryl and Billy, saying to support public radio, please support NPR and PBS.
Another one. That's a good one. That's a good one because, boy, he is gunning for you. He's gunning for you, Mina.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he's going to get anywhere, but listen, we're taking the funds, that's going to hurt. So let's see if we can do. No, this is a great idea. Yeah. We need the voices.
Eugene, before we let you go, you said something really interesting, which is, if I can do it, you can do it, right?
Yep.
So how would you what is the Eugene Carol story that you want to leave people with in terms of who you are and what you did?
Well, now I want to leave with a story that I've stood up and I've walked outside. What's happening now in the country is we're a little stunned and we're a little connected with our phones. And if we would just stand up and walk outside, take a look to our left and right, maybe talk to a neighbor. Maybe if we all, at a certain time of day, all of us got on our social media and said some terrible, truthful thing about Trump, maybe that might start something. What do you think, Mina?
Because you feel like people are too complacent. You said stunned, which is interesting to me.
They're not complacent. They're worried and depressed and frantic about what's going on, but they don't know what to do. I'm thinking that if we just choose one day, maybe in August, everybody get on their own social media at a certain time, say 4:00. We all blast him, and then we continue to do that. At least we can see that there are other people who will join with us. That could be the first step. Like banging the pans during the pandemic. Remember that? When we all went outside and banged the pans? Why don't we do that?
Eugene Carol, her memoir is Not My Type, One Woman versus a President. Thank you so much for talking with us.
I loved it. Thank you, Mina.
Stay with us for some legal analysis of Eugene's cases after the break. I'm Mina Kim. Welcome back to Forum. I'm Mina Kim. A federal appeals court in New York yesterday said it will not rehear President Trump's appeal of the $5 million sexual abuse and defamation judgment in the Eugene Carol case, starting a 90-day clock for him to appeal to the Supreme Court. Trump is also appealing Carol's second defamation case, where a separate jury awarded her more than $83 million. For a closer look at where those appeals could go and the significance of Carol's fight for accountability against a president who has avoided liability in other recent cases, we turn now to MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, who has followed Carol's civil lawsuits very closely. Lisa, welcome to Forum.
Oh, thanks, Mina. Thank you for having me.
So, Lisa, okay, so now that the appeals court for the Second Circuit has affirmed the jury verdict awarding Carol $5 million, are we done? I mean, Eugene was saying it's over. Do you think it's over? Do you think Trump will actually petition the Supreme Court?
I don't on that particular case. And remember, when we're talking about what Trump owes Eugene Carol, as you know, and you and Eugene discussed, there were two separate jury verdicts. One of them, the one that went first, is for the smaller amount of money, and it concerns the statements that Trump made about Eugene after he was president. One of the reasons that the amount of money is smaller is because he had already repeated the lie about her so many times. And so when you're measuring what the damages are, the last time that you say something, or the 18th, 19th, 20th time you say something, the damage to the person against whom you're telling the lie is obviously smaller than it is the first time. That first verdict is in the process of being appealed. It was argued last month. And there, Trump's team is taking a really interesting tactic. They are trying to say that the Department of Justice is entitled to come in, take over the case because he is president once again, and that could lead to the dismissal of a case if the Supreme Court were to allow it. A panel of the Second Circuit last month said, no way, not at this late stage. That's something you tried years ago. And in fact, under Bill Barr, they did remove the case to federal court on the basis that as the president, that Trump was entitled to invoke something called the Westfall Act. When President Biden became president, he withdrew the government's participation and an appeal of a district court's ruling saying, no, Trump had not acted within the scope of his presidency when he defamed Eugene Carol in 2019. And they sort of withdrew that certification. The Trump administration is now taking the position that because that issue wasn't litigated to completion, because the Biden administration withdrew that certification, that this Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is entitled to sort of restart that process, insert the Department of Justice in it, and hopefully get that case dismissed. That's a real consequence to Donald Trump because that's, of course, the case where he owes Eugene Carol $83 million plus interest.
So in that case, he's also arguing that the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling would apply as well, and that this case should never have been brought in the first place? Or is that in a separate appeal?
No, that's the case.
That's all the same one. Okay.
Arguing that, the Supreme Court's presidential immunity ruling in the context of what we'll call the federal election interference case was all about the president's criminal liability. And there have been lots of instances in which the president's amenability to civil liability has been discussed. Of course, famously
Right.
in the Clinton versus Jones context. I don't think that any court will find the presidential immunity argument particularly availing as to President Trump vis-a-vis his defamation of Eugene Carol. But he's going to take a swing at it in that case, just as he is belatedly taking a swing at presidential immunity in the criminal appeal of his conviction here in New York by the New York District Attorney's Office.
I want to ask you, from a legal perspective, What would you say the significance of Eugene Carroll's cases against the president have been? Are they precedent-setting in any way?
It's such a hard question to answer because technically, no. They would be precedent setting only in the judicial district in which Eugene Carroll's case was tried. And of course, it's sui generis, right? Because the person that she's suing for defamation was the once current and then again future president of the United States. But taken outside the sort of larger context, Mina, of is it precedent setting for another plaintiff? It was transformational in terms of how we think about how a plaintiff can redress sexual abuse, even sexual abuse that is decades old. Because until New York changed its law and allowed a small window of time for adult survivors of sex abuse to sort of litigate claims that had gone dormant, defamation was a really effective and creative vehicle for thinking about how do I get my justice in this case? If this isn't a case that anyone will prosecute because we're past the statute of limitations, if this is a case where civilly I can't sue somebody for sexual abuse, and we'll get to that later because Eugene ultimately did when New York changed its law, how do I get a measure of justice here when this person keeps going out and saying something I know happened never happened and that he didn't even know me? And so I think the use of the defamation tort by Eugene's legal team was absolutely brilliant because it came down to a lower standard of proof. And of course, the issue in the case was who was telling the truth about what happened, not have you prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, as there would be in the criminal context, sort of taking it out of the criminal context and moving it into what did you do to my reputation? What am I owed for what you did to my reputation? Was really brilliant and savvy on behalf of her very, very talented legal team.
Yeah, I want to ask you more about that, but really quick, it sounds like that window for adult survivors of sexual assault to make their cases is going to close soon, right? Like in a matter of months?
Yeah, I believe that in New York, it has already closed.
Oh,
If it didn't
okay.
already, there
I
was a
see.
very small window of time.
Very
It
small.
started at a date in 2022, and Eugene's second lawsuit, the one that was tried first, was not only based on a Twitter post that Trump made in October of that year on the eve of a deposition in the first case, but she then brought underlying sexual abuse civil claims based on that reopening of the window for adult survivors.
Well, let me remind listeners we're talking with Lisa Rubin, legal correspondent at MSNBC and host of MSNBC's Can They Do That on YouTube, talking about the significance of journalist Eugene Carroll's fight for accountability against a president who has largely avoided liability in other cases. And I do want to talk to you about that. So he has been accused of a wide range of misconduct, as we all knew, including hoarding classified documents and fraud, and of course the January 6th insurrection and his role in that. But you said at the time that you doubted he'd be held accountable anytime soon in those cases, predicting instead that the person most likely to immediately hold Trump to account would be Eugene Carroll. And to quote you, you said, Miss Indiana University, 1963, which she was, a woman celebrated for dispensing advice to the lovelorn, even as she suppressed her own apparent trauma. Why did you predict that? Is it because of the defamation suit, as you were describing earlier, or were there other things too that made you think that this is the case that would do it and do it quickly with regard to accountability?
Part of it was the speed with which her team moved. So Eugene originally filed suit against Donald Trump in 2019 in state court. That case was what we call removed, meaning the Donald Trump, who was then the president, we were talking earlier about his invocation of something called the Westfall Act. He then moved the case to federal court. And that was the case that wasn't tried until last year. But the fact that they moved as soon as they did really made it much easier for her to obtain relief in that window of time between the end of his first presidency and the beginning of his second. Many people looking at the criminal investigations by the Biden Department of Justice will put the fault at the feet of then Attorney General Merrick Garland for not starting the investigations with respect to Trump's involvement in January 6th or the hoarding of classified documents. They'll say, part of the problem is Merrick Garland just ran out of time. And he also made some tactical mistakes, but he also had a bunch of bad breaks. For example, the assignment of Aileen Cannon to that case, to the classified documents case in Florida, who slow walked it at every conceivable opportunity, picked up on hints that Justice Thomas had dropped in a concurrence to dismiss the case on the grounds that the special counsel wasn't properly appointed. That was what we call just bad breaks for the Department of Justice in terms of who they drew. But a lot of it also had to do with the fact that they were running against a ticking time bomb, and in ways that didn't really impact the Eugene Carol civil team nearly as much due to the fact that they had a running head start. It's also true, of course, that what Trump did to Eugene Carroll began in 2019 and not on, for example, January 6, 2021. So it's not just a happy accident that they were able to get that head start. But there are some other things too, Mina, that I want to point out. One of the things that I think Eugene's team did really successfully was think about the composition of their team in ways that a jury was likely to empathize with. And so, for example, in the first case to be tried, Eugene writes very memorably about Joe Tacopina, who looked like he came from central casting as sort of this hulking, macho criminal defense lawyer. And I will say now, in retrospect, the fact that Joe got Donald Trump to be liable for only $5 million in that case versus what Eugene walked away with after the second trial is a credit to how good Joe Tacopina was relative to other people who have represented Donald Trump. But Robbie Kaplan, who was Eugene's lead lawyer, understood that she needed a counterweight to Joe Tacopina, and she brought in her then partner, Mike Ferrara, who had been a prosecutor in federal courts in Manhattan, who, as she put it, was like her own macho Italian guy. He delivered the closing in that first trial, and I really do think, but for Mike's involvement, Mike also led Eugene through her direct examination, that case might not have turned out the way that it did.
Let me remind listeners, you're listening to Forum. I'm Mina Kim. When you were watching the Eugene trials, you tweeted in April of 2023, a final thought for tonight, friends, witnessing Eugene Carol turn around in her seat at plaintiff's table to watch Trump lawyer Joe Tacopina attack her character was searing. However this case turns out, I don't think I'll ever forget that. What about that moment is seared into your brain? What does it mean to you?
Well, first of all, Eugene also put that tweet in her book, which I didn't know until relatively recently when a friend called me to tell me that. I hadn't gotten that far yet. I have the book right next to me on my desk. But part of it is the way Eugene carries herself, and you have to sort of be in her physical presence to see it. I'm a really short person. I'm 5'2". Eugene looks like a fashion model with the carriage of a ballerina. She's an incredibly elegant woman who sat in court ramrod straight, like the good Midwestern girl that she was raised to be. And I think I said in one of the context of another of the trials that if trauma had a seated position, she had embodied it, because once Trump was in the courtroom, you could feel all the tension in her body. But in that first trial, Trump never came to the courthouse. But Eugene was going through this for the first time, and Joe Tacopina was talking about her. And you could feel her will herself, like not to look, not to look, not to look, until it just became too much for her. Very rarely do you see in federal court somebody at the plaintiff's table turn around and fixate on someone at the defense table the way Eugene did. And of course, in federal court in Manhattan, the two sides don't sit side by side parallel. The plaintiff's table is in front of the defense table. And so Eugene had to literally whip her head around and stare. And I remember she took her arm on the back of her chair and sort of looked like this and just gave him the most withering stare, as if to say, who are you to peddle these lies about me? Still, to this day, it like almost fills me with chills thinking about watching it and how dignified she was and almost daring him to look at her. If you're going to say these things about me, look me in the eye, buddy, was what silently she was connoting in her presence.
This listener Roger writes, 40 years ago, I spent an entire day observing a group of women who were helping a young woman who had been sexually abused her entire life by her father. Men were allowed to watch but not speak. The traumatic events I heard were horrific and sobering for me as a young guy. I fear that we have not been able to confront the scale of warfare women have had to endure. I asked you earlier, Lisa, about the legal sort of significance of Eugene Carroll's cases. I'm wondering if you think it has had a cultural significance, especially now at this time when there's a lot of people who feel like we're really regressing.
Yeah, I think it's a both and, Mina, right? Because clearly the victory that she found in two courts from two juries where there were significant numbers of male jurors is nothing to sneeze at. People believed her story, and I think it's particularly important that people believed her because her lawyers did a really great job of showing the impact of trauma on the brain. And I think that's what your listener was sort of referring to in a way. Trauma victims don't tell their story in a linear way sometimes. They remember some details in such vivid accounting, and others are totally lost to them. And oftentimes in our culture, we have used those disparities to say, oh, this person must not be telling the truth, without sufficiently accounting for the way that trauma changes our brain chemistry and our memories. And so I think Eugene's team was so effective in both leading her through a direct examination that was incremental and designed to sort of maximize what she remembered about the episodes as opposed to exposing the holes in them, which obviously the defense lawyers tried to do. But she was sort of non-apologetic about it, right? Like, this was a traumatic event in my life, and I remember some things very clearly and other things I don't. And she didn't let herself be pulled off course because of it. That was transformative to watch. But I think Roger is absolutely right that we have cultural failures to understand what sexual violence does to women, how it impacts choices that they make. The Diddy trial that we just witnessed here in Manhattan is a great example of that, where the jury did not buy that two of his ex-girlfriends could be victims of sex trafficking. And we don't know why, because the jurors have not chosen to speak to the press by and large. But one possibility is that they believed that women who stayed in a romantic relationship with him, or what appeared to be a romantic consensual relationship with him, couldn't possibly also be victims of sex trafficking and sex abuse, even while the physical violence toward each of them was incontrovertible, particularly with respect to his better-known ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura.
So then, Lisa, what do you predict for the verdicts in the Eugene case in terms of whether they'll hold? So far, they've shown themselves to be pretty resilient.
Yeah, and part of that is what Trump was appealing about. For example, the appeal of the first trial, which is about the post-presidential defamation, was on such narrow, almost picayune issues about the admission of particular evidence and about whether or not a victim witness who was used to corroborate Eugene could testify about being sexually assaulted by Trump on a plane. And the whole debate about that was whether or not, at the time that event transpired, what he did to her could or could not constitute sexual assault under federal statutes, literally federal aviation statutes at that. And so that verdict, I think, is definitely built to last the test of time. The other one, we'll have to see, but my prediction would be Eugene Carol walks away with a whole bunch of money to give away as she's promised.
Lisa Rubin, correspondent for MSNBC, thank you so much for talking with us and for your legal analysis.
Thank you for having me.
And my thanks to Susie Britton and Caroline Smith for producing this segment, and to all the Forum team. This is Forum. Have a great weekend.